So today we'll get started modeling, polygonal modeling. So just building on from the simple primitive cities you were building. We're going to add on some polygonal tools and see how we can work with a polygonal mesh. So I'll be building a simple chair, like that's what I'll do here, and I'll explain everything I do. So uh, yeah, so I mentioned it last time. I like to do it this way so that everything is just one-way communication first, and then you can just sort of sit back and take it all in. If you want to take notes, you can do that. I do. I am recording this, so you can also watch it afterwards. But it just takes me a while to just explain everything in any case, and then just having you attempt to do it at the same time, I don't like that. So yeah, that's why I'd rather do the lab session afterwards. So yeah, you have a question? Yeah, okay, so yeah. I'll try to the question is, can I try to repeat the questions I get on the recording? Yeah. It's just I forget. I will forget. You will have to remind me. Yeah. Okay. I think we'll start off looking at how we can or not. No, we can do that later. Let's just get started in Maya, actually. I'd like to show you a little bit of Photoshop, because I think a lot of you are not too familiar in Photoshop. So we can also use Photoshop, like set up reference images and import it to Maya so that we have a reference. But for now, I'm just going to be working just without having any reference, just explaining the basics of a. I gotta give it a minute. Yeah, I think we'll just do that. Get started right away. So this should be familiar. Yeah, flight mode is not helping. No. There's the cube. And we did look at last time, like you can go down here and you can go subdivisions height, and I can introduce more subdivisions, right? So you can do that after the fact, like when you made a primitive, you can introduce more subdivisions. And then we get more edge loops. These are edge loops. They're just loops that circle the object. We also, of course, get more vertices. So since we now have more vertices along this contour, we can grab the vertex mode, and I can grab the verts and start moving them so I can change the contours. So I don't know if you tried that or not. But obviously, if I didn't have those, I can't change the contours. I can't really do anything to that object. So let me just make a cube there on my shelf. So Control-Shift-Click, you can add anything to the shelf. Okay. Yeah, so the first tool then we're going to look at is the Insert Edge Loop tool. So it's under Mesh Tools. You see there's a whole bunch of tools. If you don't see these menus, it's because you're in a completely different menu set. So if you're in Rigging, you see they're all different. So you need to be in Modeling, and then Edit or Mesh Tools, and then Insert Edge Loop tool. I'm going to Control-Shift-Click. Now we have that on the shelf. So when I'm pressing Q, I'm in the Selection tool, so I can select things. If I click here now, you see the cursor changes. I don't know if you can notice, but it looks different. So now I'm in that tool, and I can start clicking. So if I just click on the object, you can see nothing happens. Click out here, nothing happens. There's something happened. So you have to click on the edges. So if I want to insert an edge loop here, I'm just clicking on that edge, and now it will circle the object that way, and I can place it anywhere I want. If I press on this edge or that edge, it will go along that path. So there I've introduced two edge loops. So you can see I'm still in that tool. You can see the cursor still looks a little different. So in order to get out of that tool, a quick way is just to press Q. So that, I'm back in selection tool, and then just deselect or go to object mode. So when you're working like quickly, if you press Q and then go to object mode to exit whatever it is that you're doing, that's a good habit, because then it's sort of like clean. You're not in that tool causing havoc. So okay, and if I go to edge mode, I can single click an edge, or I can double click an edge. If I double click an edge, it will select the edge loop. So if I go to wireframe, press 4, you'll see, okay, now that's selected. And there. I can also, of course, double click, shift double click, like keep selecting things. Let's say I want to select both of those edge loops at once. I can go like that. And if I hold, I think it's control. Yeah, if I hold control and right mouse button hold, you can see I have access to more of these gesture-based menus. So these are kind of handy because they're right here. You just press control and I can grow that selection along the loop. And that's very nice. If I have a lot of loops, sometimes it's very inefficient to be like if I had to double click, double click, double click, double click, that could be like literally hundreds, and then I don't want to do that. So I go rather just select all of those edges and then control, right click, hold, grow selection along loop. Now all of those are selected. Sometimes it's also nice to select things from the orthographic views. So if I'm in the front view, or in this case, that would be the side view, you can see it's a little bit easier just to see those very clearly. I can select like that, control, right click, grow along loop. Now all of those are selected. There are also other options. So let's see, edge loop utilities. So you see I can go to edge loop and delete. It's going to delete them. It's also going to delete the vertices. So remember last time I mentioned if you just select an edge loop and you delete it, actually you're leaving behind the vertices. You see these vertices are still here. So if you do that, rather you would not just click backspace, but control backspace, and that will delete edges and vertices in one go. Yeah, so if I go edge loop utilities to edge loop and delete, it will select the edge loop and delete it in one operation. So to edge loop and duplicate, there's that. And to edge loop, so just select the edge loop. So okay, so I'm just going to start shaping this as if it were the chair, the leg of the chair, somewhat. So when we're starting to build CG assets, you can think of them like how would they be constructed in real life. So whatever it is that you're attempting to build, um, like how many objects does it contain? How many separate objects? Those could actually be separate meshes. There's no need to construct these very complex meshes where everything is just a part of one giant mesh. I see the students do that a lot, and it's a nice challenge. And sometimes you do need to do that. But if you can keep it simple, just do all the different objects and literally place all the different objects next to each other. It's not only easier, well, it's easier modeling, it's easier UV mapping, and it's also technically better because then you'll actually have light occluding in the little gaps in between the objects and so forth. Okay, so if I want to scale, I can scale this object. In the middle, it will scale all the axes at once if I hold, obviously, one of the axes. But if I control click one of the axes, it will scale in the other two. So if I control scale at the top, you'll see it will not scale in the y-axis, only in the other two. So I can start shaping this object like this. So now I'm actually scaling the transform node, like I'm scaling the object's transform node. That's fine. Another way I could do it, obviously, I could grab the verts and scale them. I'm not scaling the transform. It doesn't really matter. And just so you start getting used to sort of all this mindset, so I can move this up, or I can grab the verts. I can grab these verts and snap them to the grid instead of moving the object if I wanted to do that. So a lot of times when you're moving, when you're shaping the objects and you're trying to achieve certain shapes, I think you'll find oftentimes it's the vertices that you will end up moving. So okay, first step. So I have that. Great. So that's the leg. How can we make it more interesting? Any suggestions? Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Nice input. Thank you. I won't do that. I will add some angle. Yes. Thank you. Perfect. Yeah, we could make it round. But let's just make it. Let's just change. Keep it simple. Make like a kind of a straight chair, and we'll introduce some curvature, a little bit of curvature. So to do that, obviously, I need edge loops. So I can just start inserting edge loops. If you can keep a modest amount of vertices when you're working, it's more efficient and you can achieve the shapes. And if you want to add more resolution later, you can add more edge loops later. But in general, it's a nice tip to not overdo the placement of the vertices or the number of vertices. So look at the bottom corner. We have this axis indicator. So there's a z-axis. You see, it's small, but you can probably see it. It's pointing that way. So the c-axis is going this way. This is plus c. So what we're looking at here, when the plus c is like against us, like it's coming towards us, this should always be the front of whatever it is that you're building. So, I mean, technically, it's totally possible to make the x-axis be the front, but it's not optimal because when you go between different softwares, this is always the standard. So, like in ZBrush or any other application, this would be the front, and the x-axis is always the width. So that when I go to the front view, you see, it's set up that way. So if I go to the front view and I start moving these vertices, I'm starting to establish the curvature. So I can move these gradually along. And this would be, you know, the way this leg of the chair would look from the front. So it's just a slight little curvature, maybe something like that. But this is literally how everything kind of works with polygonal modeling. You're inserting loops to get more vertices, and then you can gradually make shapes. And it's beneficial to keep it kind of light. Okay, so that's the front, and then I can go to the side view. So right now I don't have any references, so I'm just going to sort of imagine how this would be the front leg. So I'm imagining it curves a little bit this way. It could also be totally straight, which would be boring. Yes. So that's it. Not terribly exciting, but we have a shape. We're starting to introduce a curvature with a limited number of vertices. Yep. A good point. So wouldn't it be easier, I'm repeating the question, to have one at the bottom, one at the top, move that first, and then introduce the loops? Yeah, you could do that. So if I first move that over there and then introduce the loops, yeah, totally. So if you had a very clear and like concept of where you wanted this bottom part to be, and then you could move that first, and then you could introduce the loops. Yeah. Okay, so it's kind of wonky. See, that's not perfect. Move that over there. But it's okay. Okay, so that go to the front. See again the axis indicator. So now we're looking at the front. So this would be the left leg. So I'm just going to move this over a little bit so we can imagine that we're working around the middle of the grid. So whenever you're constructing assets and you're building objects, you should always be in the middle of the grid. So even if you're working in a larger scene and you're building something that's like way over here in the scene, don't build it way over there. Build it in the grid. So you approach every modeling task centered in the grid. It's just more structured and it's easier to work that way. So now I can go to the top view and I can sort of place this. If this would be the front left leg. Okay. So how do I get that over exactly to the other side? So I'm just going to do that. So when I'm happy with the placement of it, I can freeze the transformations, right? So we looked at that last time. We have the channel box. Whenever you move things around, all of these values will update. So I can go freeze transformations, which were under here, but I've added it on the shelf. So now I can go freeze. If I were to move it, I can go back and just press 0, and it will pop back to that precise location. So now if I make a copy of this object, so Control D, now I have a copy. They're in the exact same location. So a quick little trick just to get it over there, I can move the pivot point to the middle. So first I hold D and I hold X, and I can move the pivot point, like snap it to the middle grid line. So X0. And now if I go scale X -1, it will actually do an inverse scale along the x-axis in exactly -1. So it's just literally mirroring that object. We're just doing that manually, but it's very quick. And then freeze transformations on that. So now that's back to 0. It's no longer -1. So if you do that, you're moving things around. You do want to have this freeze transformations in your toolbox, and then you can just freeze it. All right, so perfect. Now we have a couple of legs. So let's make a back leg. Copy one of these, move it back here. Yeah, so maybe I do want the opposite kind of effect for that. So maybe it goes the other way. So don't be afraid to just grab the vertices and move them around, make them do what you want to do. And then you can gradually shape things fairly quickly, just grabbing vertices. Yes. Okay. All right, let's look at another tool, which is the extrude. So these are the two most important tools. So we have insert edge loop tool. Now we're able to actually insert edge loops, which will give us vertices. Now we're going to do extrude. So Control Shift click. Now that's on the shelf. So you see extrude, it will extrude all kinds of components. So the components, the vertices, let me just show that on a cube. Vertices, edges, or polys. So for the most part, we will be extruding polygons, but I can also even extrude like a vertex point, which I never do. That would do that. I do extrude edges a lot, so we're going to look at that more when we're starting to do more subdivision modeling, because we can do. Sometimes it's actually beneficial to build things out of planes, do planar modeling, and then worry about the depth. And so, but we'll do that when we do more subdivision stuff. So you can basically extrude any component, but for the most part, we are extruding the faces. So I select the polygon, and there's a hotkey for that. It's Control E for extrude. And now I'm extruding. So let me just make a couple of observations for the extrude tools. You can see what it does. It just extrudes it, and then you can move another poly out from that existing polygon. So this is very handy. So I can just keep building, extrude that. And so it's like you're blocking out the shapes. What you have to be careful with when you're extruding is that you might extrude and then it seems like nothing happened. So then you extrude again and nothing happens. And you extrude again. And then, oh, what if I do this? Oh yeah, now it worked, but it actually extruded it every time. So now you have, if I go to vertex mode and I select these vertices, you see now there are 3 vertices there. Why is that? It's just because I extruded every time, but I didn't move the polys, but they're still in there. So if I grab these polys now and I move them up, you will see that, okay, so there's that polygon. And if I move, okay, so there's that one. So they were there all along, it's just that they had 0 space, like literally not existing, but technically existing in Maya. So that's just weird. We don't need it. So you need to be aware of that. If you were to do that, you could grab these and, like if I merge one of these, so mesh tools or edit mesh, merge. Actually, we can add this to the shelf. So now we have a merge option. You can see I can merge that back together. So now this vertex point is only 1. So this is a very strange situation because now this one is 3. So we have 3 vertices and we have 3 edges actually technically coming in here now, and they're merging in that little point. See, that's the technical solution you have. It's not legal, it's just bonkers. We don't want that. So these are the kinds of things that will occasionally happen, and it's you can't really see it visually. Sometimes you see stuff like that. Oh, it looks kind of weird. If you see little visual indications like that, most often there's a problem with the mesh. Sometimes, though, it could be just a display issue, especially if you're working with large scenes. And I'm just going to mention this because this could happen to you. So if I go select camera, Control A to go to the attribute editor, we have something called near clip plane and far clip plane. So let me address this a little bit later when we talk about scaling and setting up the correct scale. But if you're working in a larger scene, you need to adjust the clipping planes. So the clipping planes just tells Maya how close can you go to the object before you see that there it starts clipping, and how far away can you go before everything starts clipping. So this is pretty far because technically this is a very small unit scene inside of Maya. But anyways, let's talk about that later. Okay, so I merged these, so now that's one, and I have this poly count up, which is handy. So that was under display, heads up display, poly count. If you activate that, you will get that little counter in your viewport, and it's actually very handy because you can see this row is just 0, 0, 0, 0. This is the total, this is the total amount of vertices and faces and edges in the Maya scene. This is the currently selected object, and this is whatever components I'm currently have selected. So if I select this, you'll see one vert. So vertices, I'm selecting 1. Here, still 1. There, I would have to merge that one also because it's still 3. But I could go like this and just select this and merge everything. And now if I do some checks, you'll see that, okay, now there's only one. So it's a pretty quick fix. But you need to know this in order to be comfortable when you're working. So you need to be able to like merge components together. A lot of times the vertices, like be able to just select them, merge them together, and then you see, okay, now it's only 1. And then you should also like be able to open them up. Sometimes you need to do that. So that would be detach. So let me add that. So Control Shift click. So now we have merge and detach. So if I go like that, if I want to open up that vertex point, because literally there are 4 edges, there are 4 vertices there that have been merged into 1, right? That's just the way Maya works. When you keep extruding, it will merge all the verts. So if I were to grab this and say detach, it will open them up. So now you see now there are 4 vertices there. And I can move them apart if I want, just to show you very clearly what that would do. Just undo, undo. Or actually, let me do that again. So a quick way to see whether or not a polygonal mesh is actually technically okay is to subdivide it. So I said we're not really going to talk so much about subdividing today. That will be next time. But it's very quick to subdivide something in Maya. You press number 3. If you have that object currently selected, you press 3. If you're in object mode, that will subdivide it. So we'll talk much more about subdividing next time, but it introduces more polygons and it also introduces a curvature. So the whole point of subdividing, we have to then get used to the placement of edge loops, how this works in order to control the curvature based on the placement of the edge loops. So that's kind of it takes a little while to get used to. But for now, you can just use subdivide quickly to see if there are some troubles. And if I press 3 here, you can see that now since these are unmerged, you see that, oh, that's a very strange effect. It just goes to that pointy edge, and it shouldn't do that. It should just go like this when you subdivide, like a smooth connecting mesh. So I do that when modeling, just press 3 just to see if things work, and you can very quickly tell, no, it's not really okay, and then I go there, merge it, and now it should be fine. And when I subdivide, it will look like this. So we can try it on that one. Yeah, so that's kind of a predictable result. You see all the nice curved edges just flowing around. Press 1 and then 1 to go back to standard polygonal mode. Okay, so since I copied that back leg from this front leg, it retains that front curvature, so that's nice. So it also has that curvature. So if I just want to continue on with this, I could, for instance, grab this polygon and just extrude it. So I press Control E and then I drag it up. This little icon on the extrude button or the extrude tool will change the axis. So if I'm, actually I would have to show that. If I'm extruding, okay, so let me extrude. When you're extruding, you can also click the circle that will access the rotational handle, and then I can rotate, and then I can keep extruding, and I can extrude again. So you see now, initially the extrude follows the polygon, so what we call the normal of the polygon, just the direction of the polygon. When I click there, the indicator will change to world coordinates. So if I don't want to extrude it along its normal, I can click that little button, and now I can pull it straight up if I wanted to do that. And I can extrude again. So, keep extruding. That's another way. So technically, see the way that what I've arrived at is similar to just making that cube and introducing edge loops. Like technically, it's exactly the same thing that we're doing. It's just a different approach. So let's do one more thing with the extrude. So if I extrude once again, and I'm not going to move it anywhere, but I'm going to actually scale. So if I hold Control and scale on this one, it's going to scale in the other two. So you can see I can drag that inward. So that's nice. See if I pull it up, that's more evident, like what it's doing, but I'm just scaling it in. What I don't want to do is, for instance, scale it out like that. You can see I'm creating something that's not really, this is not a legal mesh anymore. So I can pull it down. You can see this is no good. So we're looking at the back sides of the polys. This is no longer what we call a manifold mesh, meaning that, a manifold mesh just means that something that makes sense like this is just continuous. What we're looking at when we're observing it here is all the front faces, and I can even go inside it and look at all the back faces. So it's just this continuous mesh. Like it makes sense geometrically. I can easily do things that would make it not legal. If I just rotate that like that, obviously you can tell that's not legal because now the back faces are there. If I go inside and look at it, it's all a mess. This is a non-manifold mesh. It will not really work for anything. Okay, so what can we do with this? I can extrude it again, for instance, and I can pull it down, pull it up. Extrude it again, pull it in, pull it up, or down. Or extrude one more time and pull it down. That will make that little indent if you want to make like holes. So that's interesting. So you can do a lot with extrude. Pull down. And of course it's pretty cool if I subdivide you can arrive at these shapes. So that's what we're going to do a lot when we're subdividing, like get used to like the placement of edges using extrude, so we can influence that shape pretty quickly. So you can see even with subdivision, I mean even with polygonal modeling, even if you're building these simple shapes, you can fairly quickly turn them into more complex shapes. So it's all about getting used to these simple building blocks, like working with meshes, understanding how to arrive at legal, what you call legal meshes that are technically okay. All right, let me extrude again. I'm using this side view. Maybe I want to curve that back a little bit and introduce some more edge loops. Just a couple more. And you see, I'm trying to keep the placement of the vertices a little bit even. So, I mean, it just looks better, and there are some benefits to that when you're exporting, again, to different applications, to have more or less an even polygonal distribution. So you see, like roughly speaking, they're more or less the same size. There's no like extreme areas that are totally different size. You can see that it sort of makes sense. Yeah, I'm talking about the polygons themselves. Like the polygonal spacing is pretty evenly distributed. Okay, great. So let's add a seat. So this is it. Like literally, just like I said, just keep adding objects, tuck them into each other, or just technically it's okay if they're slightly intersecting. It's actually fine. As long as you hide that intersection. So, that would not be okay because I can see that. It's like, that's not really okay. This would be okay. Because it's intersecting. Or I could just not actually pull it that far down. I could leave just a little bit of a technically it's a little gap. I can do that. All right, and then grab these words, move them forward. I can grab these words and scale them towards each other to start shaping that seed. So let me move this leg perhaps a little bit like that. So I can fit that in there. And then I'll freeze transformations on this leg. I'll copy it and I'll go -1 in scale X, and then we'll move it over there. And then freeze transformations on those. One way of selecting vertices and selecting components, you can use the F8 up until F12. So F8 would be object mode, F9 would be vertices, F10 would be edges. Yeah, you can try them out. I'm not going to do that now because it's going to quit my recording because F9 incidentally is a hotkey in Camtasia. But it's actually, you would need that sometimes because if I select both of these and I do want to select both of those vertices, or let's say you select 100 objects and you want to go to vertex mode, you don't want to do this. Okay, vertex mode, vertex mode, vertex mode, vertex mode. You need a quick way to go between the component modes. And that's actually, that, like I said, it's F8, F9 is vertex mode, F10, I forget, I think it's edge mode. So you'll have to try that when you're on the lab. Like use those F keys. But I can go vertex mode, and then I can go grab these verts and actually scale them apart. You can do that. So even though they're separate objects, I can still work with them as if they're part of a whole. Let's add back here. So a little tip sometimes, like when you're building assets, if I now quickly want an object here, maybe I'll copy this guy only for the purposes of grabbing this polygon and then deleting the rest. And then I can extrude that guy. I mean, it's a little practical tip, because just think about the existing geometry. Maybe there's something there that you can use, and it's just it's quicker. You know, if you're, maybe I can use that poly that's already right there. I don't want to just start extruding it from that object because I do want it to be a separate piece. Like again, you can just think about how would it be constructed. You know, this would probably be its own little piece. It would like be either screwed on or attached somehow. Right? Very rarely would it be like carved out of a single piece of wood. Sometimes it would, and that would be a more intricate object to model. So then you would have to, yeah, well, that those sorts of like, for instance, like a garden chair that would be very intricate. It would be a part of one mesh. So we can look at that next time when we're starting to do polygonal subdividing. So yeah, so that was how I did that. I just copied that object, and then I selected this poly. So when you have something selected, if you want to invert the selection, you can hold Shift and just do a selection marquee. So I'm selecting everything else, and it will deselect what I had currently selected. So if I quickly I only want this, I select that, and then I do Shift Control or Shift selection marquee, delete. Now it deletes everything else. And I can extrude that piece like that. Oops. Okay, so let's say I want to move these vertices now exactly to the middle of the grid. I can like, yep. Yes. I think your OCD is playing tricks. Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. You're right. You're right. Thank you, OCD person. That's good. Yeah, nice catch. So then go away. Uh, yeah, no, that's good. So then move. Okay, so all right, so now I made a copy. All right, so you see that pivot point is actually not in the center. So I can hold D and hold X and now snap it to the middle. And now your OCD should be pleased. There. That's better. And then freeze transformations. Very good. Sometimes, though, you might want to, introduce some imperfections in your model. So when you first build them, you first use the OCD mode and make everything perfect. And then you go in there, intentionally add some little bit of variation, like a little bit of imperfection, so that everything's not perfect. Let's see, so center pivot on that. One other thing, if I move this, oh yeah, so So if you want to have access to some of the tool settings, like if I'm in Move Tool, I can click W, right? To go to Move Tool. If I hold W and I click left mouse button, click and hold, I have access to some of the tool settings. You can also access the tool settings by double clicking here, and here are all the tool settings. But a quick way when you're working, so if I'm in the Move Tool and I want to access the settings for that tool, I can hold W, hold left mouse button, and now I can switch between object or world. So if I'm in world, you can see the axes are in the world coordinate. If I hold W, left mouse button, click and hold, and select object, now it's according to the object. So if that's rotated, that's a very handy thing to be aware of. Okay. Okay, so where was I? Okay, so if I want to have these vertices now be directly aligned to the middle of the grid, I can move them around, I can hold X, and I can go like that, right? So we're used to that. And this will just keep snapping to grid points. So if I go to the middle, that will snap into the middle. Let's say they were slightly misaligned, so something like that. Then I could first grab these verts and start scaling them towards each other in that axis. So you can see when I do that, gradually they become more aligned. Or I can scale them apart. So if they were slightly misaligned, if you scale them apart, they will become even more misaligned. So you scale them towards each other, that will work. Also, there's another, yeah, so you can hide menus here. This is for the, if you're working on a limited resolution or something like I'm doing currently. So then I have to, here, where you have, you can actually enter this numerically. So if these were misaligned, and sometimes, you know, there could be like hundreds of vertices. So you can go be in the Move tool, select all the vertices, and then I go here, select 0x. That should move all those vertices to 0x. Sometimes that doesn't work, but for the most part, if you do that, they move it to 0x. I don't want to, okay, I scaled them, what happened there? Oh. Yeah, but see, that's in Z, so it shouldn't move them in the Z axis. So if I go like that, this should work. 0x, it should only move them in the X axis, but that must have happened when I was scaling, probably. But if I only scale in X, it shouldn't do that. So I probably, maybe I scaled both of these axes, so at once. Yeah. In any case, so now, because this is a very common thing. If you want to build symmetrical objects and you're spending more time on one half, sometimes you have to align the middle edge. And it's a very good habit to actually have a dividing line like that. Like if you have a symmetrical object, it should probably have a dividing line along 0x so that you can delete half of the object at any time. That's a good technical solution. So now we can see I move this to 0x, or try this again, 0x. So let's look at mirroring. So if I want to mirror this, it's another tool we're going to look at, or another function. It's under Mesh Mirror. So this also works according to the coordinate system. So if we go into the options for it, so any operation or anything you see, it has all these boxes. So you can go into them and have access to the settings. So now I'm in the mirror options. So we are dealing with the x-axis, so we do want to have x selected, but and then we have to be aware which direction. So plus will go with the x, and that's what we want in this case. You can see the x-axis goes that way, that's the plus direction. Minus would go that way. And then, so if we try to mirror this currently, it will do that. So it looks fine, but there's a problem technically with it. Can anyone spot it? Yeah. I think I perfectly scaled them, but okay, maybe not. But okay, so yeah, there is a problem now because I didn't delete the vertex, or I mean the polygon that was there. before I mirrored. So now there should be, if we go inside here and look, oh, oh no, it actually does that now. So they fixed this. Okay, so that's good. So you don't have to worry about that? That's nice. Never mind. Well, we can see if there are more vertices. No, it's only one vertex. Well, that makes sense. So, okay, so they've updated that tool because it used to be, I mean, it used to be more logical. If you don't delete that, you're leaving behind that polygon, and then you would have a polygon inside the mesh. Right. So, but now they made it more user-friendly, so that's nice. So if you now mirror, because it doesn't make sense to mirror if you want, you never want to have. No, it's not working at all. So, yeah, because you never want to have polys in the object. So from old habit, I would probably just delete that, so just to be sure. Because this would be the half for the object, right? When we cut the object in half, this is what you want to look at. You're looking into the back faces. You literally just cut it in half. This is it. I think that's what you're seeing there. It's just that other leg intersecting. So if we move this, yeah, so that's fine. So mirror, and that's that. So go to the top view. Maybe I want to add some curvature that way. So this is how you can approach it. Like just use the different orthographic views. Think about the curvature from the front, from the side, from the top, and gradually establish the curvature you want. Maybe I can try this tool, edge loop utilities, to edge loop and duplicate. That will give me a couple more loops that way. I could also have used this tool. Let me show you. Okay, so if you double click this, it should open the tool settings for, like any tool, if you double click it, it will open the tool settings for it. Also, like I did here with the move tool. So if I double click here on the insert edge loop tool, I can do, see it's set to relative distance. That means I can place it anywhere I want. If I set it to multiple distance, and this is not so logical, but if I do 1, it's not multiple, but if I do 1, it will actually place it in the center between things. It's like the mathematical center between these vertices. So if I place it, I can't move it anywhere. It's like, that's where it is. So that's another way to, if you want just the accurate placement of the edge loop, like in the middle of between two vertices, you go into the settings and you click multiple edge loops and just press 1. Then it will do that little thing where it will actually center it. So the other quick way I did it here was through this gesture-based menu set, so I can hold control, right-click, and edge loop utilities to edge loop and duplicate. I will select the edge loop and it will duplicate it, and it will give you 2 duplicates that are perfectly spaced apart. And I can select both of these, move them back. Oh, there is a symmetry setting on the move tool. So if I hold W again, left mouse button, click and hold, see there's symmetry. So I can activate symmetry. Didn't work. Why not? Don't know. So this symmetry is not working. Let me freeze transformations, delete history, center pivot. So now it's working. So you can see that sometimes if you have history in the object and there's a lot of operations and maybe you haven't frozen the transformations, this could literally influence some of the operations so that they don't work correctly, which just happened. Like when I tried to do the symmetry on the move tool was okay. It was just the mesh had issues, right? So if you get into the habit of delete history, freeze transformations, like you're working a very, very clean way, chances are you won't encounter too many problems. No, you will, but fewer of them. So now W left mouse button, click and hold, I can activate symmetry like that. And that will initially be along, you see the x-axis. And the x-axis is usually what you want symmetry across because that is the width. So I can select here, you'll see it's selected there, and I can go, no. Usually I don't bother so much with symmetry settings because I will just like work on, well, if I wanted to do that, I could just go like that and move them. right? It's not a big deal. But it does have a symmetry setting. So this allows me now to do any sort of changes to that site, and whenever I want, I can delete half and just mirror it. So technically, that's a good solution. Maybe I want it more narrow. So now I can rotate. Another way to now I have this axis. You can see that it's currently selected. So I can plus minus. I can make this icon larger or smaller. Uh, as long as you have an axis selected, I can also use middle mouse button, and I actually have a little bit of a finer control. So now I'm using middle mouse button, like going left to right. I can rotate a little with finer increments. If you want a very fine placement of things, sometimes this will give you too, well, now it's okay, but sometimes that will give you too much of a rotation. Then you can use middle mouse button to nudge that in place, as long as that axis is selected. All right, I'll just do that. That's okay. And scale these. Yeah. Yep. So obviously, spend more time on this to make that perfect. Okay, so now I didn't really save projects. Let's see. So again, I'm gonna just repeat that. So project window. I go new project. I could store it to the server, but on this computer, the communication to the server is so slow. So I'm gonna store it locally. Oh no, there. So I'm just selecting that path, and then I'm gonna call this 180829. Two. So this would be the project folder. Now that's stored, and then I can save this. If you just make a habit of trying to stay organized, it's a good habit because if you start naming things in different funny ways, yeah, you'll get lost. So maybe the dimensions here are a little wonky. If I want to now control the, yeah, let me show you that. So let me show you. So again, I select everything, delete history, freeze transformations is a good habit. I can also center pivot. If I want to, oh, they changed this. It's under deform now. Yeah, here it is. Lattice, lattice, remove lattice, reset lattice. Make the lattice. Where's that? There. Okay. So this used to be under animation, then we'd have to go into animation because this is an animation deformer. So it's actually built for the purposes of animation. So you have a lot of deformers that you can actually also use in modeling, which is why now they've implemented it under the modeling toolset. So I'm just showing you that in case you're interested. You can go to deform, and a common deformer to use is a lattice. So now I see they added it there, and that didn't work. So I've never used this new thing. Oh, here it is. So yeah, no, that's some other new lattice function. But this should, if you just select all the objects and select this lattice function, you'll see you'll get this. Well, it looks like edges, and it's in wireframe mode, and that's essentially what it is. You can grab the lattice points, and now the lattice points will work as if they were vertices, more or less, for the entire object. So if I do that, and I select the top lattice points, and I start moving them around, you can see I can easily change the contours of an object, even though it has multiple objects. So I select all the objects, make a lattice. Now I have a deformer for the entire thing. So I can select these, and I can scale them apart. This becomes a very powerful tool. That. So when you're done with that, to get rid of things, usually in Maya, I would delete history. That's like how we break connections. If I delete history, that lattice will disappear because it has no connection to the object anymore. So various operations you do, various connections you make, you should get into the habit, delete history. I've said that 100 times, so I'll say it 100 more. Because if you don't do that, it will really cause problems. It will pile up with a lot of inputs, and things will not work correctly. Sometimes when you save your scene and you open it back up, things have exploded, and yeah, this happens. Okay, so that's the basics of extrude and insert edge loop, and I think we should talk about bevel, and we should talk about Photoshop a little bit. Are there any questions to this approach? Yep. Smooth the edges? Oh, yeah. You mean when I press 3, I'm literally, instead of doing that, yeah, you can go, I don't know if this is what you mean, but you can go and smooth them. Smooth. Is that what you mean? No. Yeah, bevel, so that's a different thing. But if you want to, okay, so I'm not sure what you're referring to, but you can smooth them. This will literally quadruple the poly count. Like every poly is now 4 polys, so you quickly get like an exponential result because each time it will quadruple. So now I'm pressing G to do the same operation. So you see quadruples, quadruples, and you can make very smooth and nice objects. And that's technically what's going on when you're pressing 3. It's just this nice thing that now I can go back and forth. Now I cannot go back. So that, yeah, I don't know. Another way, like smooth shading, maybe you're referring to that. That could be, see if I make a sphere, for instance, you see it looks very smooth. It's because there's smooth shading applied. So I can go to mesh display and I can go harden edge. You see now there's no smooth shading on the edges. So, but Maya just thinks, okay, you want a sphere, you probably want it looking kind of soft. So then you soften edge. So if you see in the first lecture, you remember the Gora shading where you do this linear interpolation, you get a very smooth result. That's what you're doing there. And it's doing the same here. If I can go in here and select these edges. So I'll go to edge loop, and I can go mesh display harden edge. Nah, not really. Yeah, you can see it there. Gives you a more faceted result. Because light is only reflecting in that normal direction of each poly. And then if I go to edge loop, I can go and smooth them. Where is it? Soften edge. Now you can see it be more soft. Yep. Mm. Oh, you mean intentionally leaving them faceted? Yeah, you could. The problem with it is that, yeah, well, we can get more into that. But the problem with one edge in Maya and any other 3D application is that they don't virtually have any thickness, right? So maybe we'll take a little break and then we'll talk about bevel and things like that. But the problem here is that also with this is that, yeah, there is an edge there, but it has no volume. So if you take a look at the table next to you or any kind of sharp edge, what will happen is that light will catch that edge and you will actually kind of see a little line of light along the edge because it has volume. There's something there. This is technically not possible, right? Because it just meets in this infinitely small point and it has no volume. So that's why it looks extremely fake because you get this harsh transition between this shaded part and this lighter part, right? So it's kind of the same problem here where, yeah, you can leave them behind, but the problem is that it doesn't have any volume. I don't know if that's making sense, but I can then bevel them and then that effect would show up still. And yeah, so yeah. But yeah, so let's take like a little 10-minute break and then we'll talk about bevel. So we'll be back here at 10:50. I think we're just gonna have to get moving on this. So we're gonna pick up where we left and talk about the problem with the edges. So like we said, an edge here has virtually no thickness. It has no volume. The problem being light is not hitting that edge. So there's a tool in here for exactly that purpose. And I think this would be a good time for us to save an iteration, right? So this would be save scene as, well, I already have O1. This could be O1. Okay, save as, yes, right. This is the first iteration. And then I could save already, just save O2. Now I know that I'm now in the second iteration. I can start working. So the second iteration of this scene would be where I'm starting to introduce bevel. This could be nice because I would then have access to this chair in that other iteration if I want to go back. Or what I do typically, I would just Control D, duplicate everything, Control G, and leave that here, Control H to hide it. So now that early version of the chair is just here. Whenever I want to go back to it, I have it there. So first of all, making sure delete history, all the objects, looking good. So the tool here is bevel. So we gotta find bevel. There it is. So Control Shift click, we can add it. So we can select an edge and click bevel. So you see what it actually does, it turns it into a polygon. That's what a bevel does. In addition, it has some segments, so now it has just one segment. I can add more segments by holding middle mouse button, click and drag, and now I'm in the inputs here, and like this is the history, this is the last operation I did, which is poly bevel. I'm on segments, and I click here, and then I can use middle mouse button, so now I'm adding more segments. So you see, okay, well that looks great, and then I go to object mode. Okay, but this is technically a problem right now with this mesh. Can anyone spot the problem? Tech. What's that? The corner? Yes, that was what I was looking for. It's no longer only quads. We do have a polygon here, which has a lot of edges, which is this one. So actually, when we do this, you can see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It now has 10 edges. And technically, when we're building models, we don't want to have any poly be more than 4 edges. You can have some tries, but never more than 4. So that's a part of the challenge when we are modeling. So we're going to undo that. And you might also see similar solutions, like I don't know if some of you have tried some Boolean operations, and which are ways to just carve out shapes from other shapes, and but then it would leave behind a lot of illegal topology, and then you'd have to go and clean it up. Okay, so let's not do that. Let's then, in this case, this is a simple object. Like I can see that all the edges here are actually contour edges. In other words, all the edges contribute to the shape. It's basically a cube. If there were more edges like that, let's see if this will work in object mode. Yes, it does. So if I bevel the entire object, like just in object mode, and I select it and I hit bevel, you will see literally it turns every edge into a polygon. Wherever there was an edge, now there is polygon, or there are more edges. Like it's technically, but that's kind of what it does. You see here now there's a poly, there's a poly, there's a poly, there's a poly. And I can go down to the inputs, and I can go segments, and I can add more segments like that. And now there are more segments everywhere. But I don't really need them in here, right? Because they're not contributing to the shape. In other words, they're not contour edges. They're not contributing to the contours of the object. They're just internal edges that could be there for technical reasons or just so, or like to define the shape. In other words, they could still be a part of influencing the shape, so but they're not like it could be there for that purpose, but they're not sort of on corners, right? So undo, undo, undo. So I don't have to bevel those. So I can one thing I can do is I can quickly select all the edges I don't want to bevel. So I can double click that, shift double click that, and then I'll shift marquee select to invert that selection, and now I have only the ones I want to bevel. So that's kind of a quick mindset. Like sometimes if instead of selecting a lot of things, you can select only the things you don't want and then invert that selection. So if I go select these and grow selection along loop, and then shift selection marquee will invert that selection. And now I can do the bevel. Now you see only those edges will, well, there's trouble because somehow I selected that. Oh, it's not really. So this tool might not be the best. It's not really giving me that edge loop. Why isn't it? I can see that the edge loop works because when I double click it is actually selecting the edge loop. Sometimes if you double click an edge loop, if it's not selecting the loop, there could be like a technical issue. So if I detach that, yeah, it's still, so you see now it's kind of confused because now this edge, this vertex is now 4. But as long as it's a legal mesh and I merge them back together, I can double click. You can see that it will select the edge loop. So if the edge loop gets selected, that's a good sign because it means like your mesh is probably technically okay. So I think there's just a problem with this gesture-based thing. It's not really working too great when I do multiple ones. So it seems like, yeah, that's strange. So I used to like set up a hotkey for this. If you want to do that, you can go to hotkey editor. You can set up hotkeys for anything. Oh no. Yeah, never mind. They changed the interface. I don't want to get into that. So, anyways, all right, boom. Now bevel should work. So just make sure you don't select any additional edges except the corner ones, and then go into the operation. And here I can say maybe I want to add one more segment so that it gives us a little bit more, a little nicer solution topologically because you can see it only leaves quads. If I have only one segment, this leaves the little triangles on the edges. But if I have this two segments, what it does is it adds an additional edge loop in here, and it also gives you these very nice rounded off corners, but they're all quads. So this is a quad, this is a quad, like polys with 4 edges. And then we have another setting, should be the, what is it, fraction? Yeah, the fraction. So I can also use middle mouse button, click and sort of slide that, or enter it numerically. So 0.1. So this could be pretty subtle, you know, that could be enough potentially. It's still, you can see now light is actually hitting, it's reflecting off of that little corner, and it looks already more convincing. And then I could delete history, and all is good. That's bevel. Questions? So, yeah, same here. Like some of these I don't want to bevel, some of them I want to bevel. I don't want to bevel these. Just select them, shift select the rest, and then bevel. And then 0.1 was the fraction. And then the fraction. And then probably 2 segments. Even on that little piece, maybe I could do that, or 1 segment. If you're okay with having tris at the corners there, it's okay. And if you want to reduce the poly count, yeah, okay. So for games, like you can build high poly objects, and then this could be baked down as a normal map. So there, like in a game engine, there are more tricks. Like if you don't want to have such a high poly count, if you're building for VFX or anything else, it really doesn't matter. So yeah, but in any case, you do need, even if your like goal is to be making very low poly final output, uh, you do need to be able to model high poly and bake this information down into something we call a normal map. We're not going to be really spending time on that in this class, but that's just, it makes modeling highly relevant regardless of the output you're doing. You know. So now I could do the same over there, or I could just copy this one and then, we'll move this pivot, whoops, dx, and move it over there. And then I'll do scale -1 and delete history and freeze transformations. And yeah, okay, good. So see, it just looks a little more convincing now. Light is hitting here, here. It looks like there's an actual volume there. Sometimes, like I said, sometimes maybe it's easier to select edges from the orthographic views. Maybe if we go to the side, I don't know. In this case, maybe it's just simpler to select those. Just shift clicking and just making sure to select only the corner ones. Yep, and then bevel, and then we're going to do 0.1 in the fraction, for instance, in 2 segments. And then I'm going to delete history. I'm going to copy that and do the same thing. Oops. So I keep, yeah, I did this last time too. If you hit S, you're making a keyframe, and then all these channels will become red. So you can just select all the channels, right-click, and then you would break connections. So if you see that your channels are red, it means that you added a keyframe for animation. I don't want to do that. But it happens all the time because S is right there. So you press S, you make a keyframe. So you want to break connections, just your channels are no longer red. And then copy that, move the pivot point, and then do -1. You have a question? Um, yeah, the bevel is now no longer any operation. Like now it's just normal geometry, right? So it's no longer a bevel operation in a sense. We did the bevel to achieve this geometry, right? So I don't know. Now this is literally just polygon. So I can go in here and do whatever I want. I can extrude only this face and go like that. If I want to subdivide that, I can also extrude only that little face. I don't know why I would want to do that, but I could do that. So it's just, these are all just polys. So yeah, so if you want, in other words, like if you want, yeah, okay, so I think I see what you're, you want to make a pillow? No, don't do that. No, no, no pillow. No, okay, sorry. Yeah, okay. What? Yes, yes. No, you could divide the tasks. So like you could spend time on making that careful little thing, and then you would divide it. You know, yeah, it could be a little bit of a challenge, technical challenge, but yeah, uh, yeah. I don't know. We'd have to look at that example a little bit more concretely. Yes. So you're really into Chesterfield sofas. They're nice. Yeah, very good. Yes, so I think that this will become a little more clear, like once we get more into subdividing and working with a little more intricate meshes, then you can. Yeah, yeah. Because we need a little more. We need more polys. You know, so if you have more polys, now I can go and I can extrude that in, then extrude it in, then extrude it down, and extrude it in, then extrude it up, and do whatever I want. And then when I subdivide, I will get like little details, right? So yeah, so that would be like a Chesterfield kind of thing, and then I could grow that selection, grow. There's a button for it. Yeah, so that larger than symbol next to the shift key, I don't know what you call that. There you go, you can grow the selection and then work with that. And now technically, you know, this you could build this little piece and then copy those polys over, so you wouldn't be building each, yeah. So this has to do with subdividing and the way you're sort of building simple polygonal objects and looking at, oh, this is the way it looks subdivided. But it all sort of builds on the same techniques. So if the first order of business would be to do this, like, you know, yep, get out, yep. Mm. I'm gonna add 2 segments. Yes, I'm gonna turn down the fraction. This could have a different fraction. All right, so technically I think I mentioned this before, I like having separate objects and doing this and having that little bit of a gap and not everything being completely mathematically perfect because that's the way it would be. You know, you actually want light to not enter there. You see that little gap? So if we render that, it'll just be a little bit more convincing. So you add a little bit of imperfections here and there. If you do that, though, you want to keep that poly in there. You don't want to delete it. You can do solutions like this, and this would be more for if you're building more, if you're very concerned with the poly count. Like literally, we could put that thing in there and we just intersect. So technically, that's totally fine. Things can intersect. And then I'll just grab all of those polys and I'll delete them. So those inside there, I get rid of them. Right. That's okay because we're never going to see them unless the chair is going to explode, in which case you would have to build them, which is something you have to think about. You know, if you're whatever you're doing a game, if it's going to is destructible or not, you know, yeah, and you have to build it that way. This would be a problem then because now we're looking at the back faces. We don't want that. So yeah, no, so no. Delete history. So I would add now, I would do things like, yeah, this is looking good, but then I would, this is very crazy back here. This is just intersecting. So that's not how this would be built, right? So this I would do before the bevel. So you see, this is all crazy. Let's just ignore that. But yeah, just don't do that. You know, you build things like the way it would be built. And I would just look at a chair. Typically, you would have like supporting elements underneath here, probably. Let me see if I can quickly copy this object, and I'll just select these faces, and I'll shift select everything, so delete everything else. So I'm just using this as the basis for a new little, oh, see there? There's a little poly that was not deleted. So that needs to go away. Whoops. Whenever you want to isolate something you're working on, you can press Shift I for isolate. Oh, they also added something there. So, but Shift I, you can isolate. And if you select nothing, and Shift I, you will isolate nothing. So everything will appear. This is the logic. So Shift I, it's only a visual thing, but it's extremely useful when you're working. Shift I, isolate. So now I can only work on this, and I can see that, oh, there's something strange there. That's just a floating polygon that's left behind, and it needs to go away. That. Shift I. And I can add supporting elements. So maybe I extrude this entire plane. I could also build this, obviously, from scratch. And make a cube, move it there. But since I had that little geometry already in place, maybe that was a little bit quicker, and then I can go make these little supporting elements however they are created. Maybe I then want to look at some reference and sort of try to figure this out. I can move the verts. You get the idea. And then these little details is actually what's going to increase the realism. It's not so much that we pay that much attention to them, but we see that there's more going on. You know, your eye will kind of fill out the blanks just by adding a few little hints of details. If I had a cylinder, obviously we have more polygonal primitives. You can do a cylinder, you can do a torus, and that would be like a donut. And then you could do a cone. That's a weird topological solution, though, because there's a whole bunch of tries, and it's all ending up in this impossibly vertex point, which has virtually no volume. So that it's not, this would not be a good shape, you know, because it's not technically plausible. You don't ever have something ending up in a non-existingly tiny point. A vertex point has no volume. So then you'd have to figure this out. You'd have to add some volume there. Maybe we could bevel it? Yeah, you could bevel it. You know, but yeah. So I would rather build that from a cylinder, which already has at least some volume, and then I would just scale those vertices towards each other, and now you would have volume there. But anyway, so we have a cylinder. So yeah, you can experiment with these different polygonal primitives. But if I have a little cylinder, I can go down here and say subdivisions, not 20, but maybe 8. We make a little, scale it down, hold control, scale in the other 2, put it down there. Maybe make a little bolt, you know, how would this actually be? All right, so when you rotate stuff, you can see there, it just goes numerically. Whoops. I mean, in very small increments. You can enter numeric values. If I hit 90 degrees, it will rotate 90 degrees. There's okay, so like any other tool, like the move tool, if you hold W and left mouse button click, you can get options. I can do the same with the rotate tool. So if I hold E and left mouse button click and hold, I have access to settings for the rotate tool, and discrete rotate being one of those. So I can do discrete rotate. Now it will rotate in whole numbers. You see there. Very nice. And that's very quick because I can just go like that whenever I want to enable discrete rotate. And then maybe I'll add a little bolt. Somewhere. I mean, I can use the orthographic views for the placement. It would be much easier. So I go here. It should be over there. Whatever. Maybe that's bolted in there. And then I can go to the front view and place it here. And there it is. And that could be a tiny little thing, but I would even for that, I would bevel this. Maybe for that tiny thing, I don't need two segments. I can leave that little segment, but I could do something like that. I probably need more poly, so I could smooth it once, you know. Yeah, excellent. Or not. So I wouldn't worry too much about the aesthetics of what you're building. It's just getting into the habit of, working with these meshes. And when I've been working here, there hasn't been a lot of issues, which is unfortunate because there will be a lot of issues when you model. So I like when issues happen here and I have to resolve them, because then, yeah, it will most likely occur. But like I mentioned, the basic thing, if you press 3 and you have a predictable subdivision, chances are things are pretty good. If we looked at detaching vertices, if I do that, we'll no longer have a predictable subdivision result. Other things that could happen is that the normal could be flipped for various reasons. Mesh, normals, reverse. If you see that, you're looking at the back face of this poly. So this is just one of those things that can occur for various reasons. We never want to see this. This is horrible, and it has to do with the lighting here not being set to two-sided lighting. So the viewport, I mean, technically we can display this, and there are shaders that you can render the back face, but we never want that technically in here when we're building. But if I turn on two-sided lighting, you won't even see it. So for this, turn off two-sided lighting, and that is turned off now by default, which is good, because we do want to see if there's a problem here. And the back faces will be black, and it's not just because this poly is literally flipped. So if I go inside, yeah, it still looks black there, but the front of that is actually turning upside down. So then I can select that face, and I can go mesh normals. This has to do with the normal angle, like the normal direction of the poly. So a normal is just the direction that the poly is pointing. And then I can reverse it. Now it's good. There are other tools there, so if this is, let me tear off this menu. If that is reversed, this should work. So conform will basically just, the majority will decide. If you have some of them that are not correct, the majority will, everyone will be conformed. Yes. But sometimes that doesn't work, whatever, Then you'd have to do it manually. You select each of those and reverse. Just be aware that if you're looking at black polygons, that's probably what happened. What else? Yeah, so if you take the time to add little elements like this, like supporting elements, and think about how things are constructed, if you do that, okay, so that won't really work for that piece. Let's see. Whatever, make a new one. I think it will really add to the realism pretty quickly, even though these elements are pretty simple. It could be just a cube tucked under there. It's just that when we look at this object now, there's a little bit more going on. It seems a little more plausible. And we could add little bolts, like up here. Look. Excellent. I can add it down here. Perfect. This is coming together very nicely. Yes. Oh, no. It went away. There it is. Rotate it a little bit. I'm going to turn off discrete rotate. Oh, yeah. Flip it over there. If you're not bored yet, I don't know what's wrong with you. But anyways, here. So I can copy that and I move the pivot again and I'll go -1. Then it's over there. And I'll copy that and hold D and hold X and over there and go -1. Brilliant. So I wanted to talk more about like Photoshop and things, but I think we don't have time. I'll have to do that in the lab. Or maybe we should. There's 10 minutes. Yeah, we'll do that. So if you Google images, there's this site called Google. You can go to images and you can find, there are settings for it. So you can even search for colors. Like if I want like orange chairs for some reason, you can just say, show me, yeah. Anyways, so if you want to temp this chair, like when you're starting with, no, go away. I don't want this. Is too confusing. Yeah, it's too expensive. Orange chairs. Okay. That's not too bad. 180. Yeah, I forgot. Just save image. If you find images, you can save them. So I can go JPEG, you know, as a standard format. Save. Now it's saved. There it is. It's a JPEG file. I can right click and I can say open with Photoshop. If Photoshop doesn't show up here, you can go choose another app and then you find Photoshop. And then you click open. Oh, okay. No, didn't work. Ah. See if that'll work. No. Never happened to me in my life. I don't know how to. Oh, gosh. This. I could do a screen grab then. So print screen. And that. Okay. And then. Okay. So then. Where are my layers? Layers. So you go to Window, Layers. This is the crucial window. Layers. Initially, when we make a document, it will have a layer and it will be locked. We can unlock it if you click there. It's just a white layer. I can make a new layer. I can uncheck the original layer. Now I can see these checkerboard patterns. That means this is invisible. There's nothing there. But then I can, since I did print screen, I can do Control V, and there's the chair, and all is good. Now there's a setting here called, yeah, I can use this if I want to crop, and then I can go like this, and then I can go enter, and now this document is cropped to those dimensions that I just defined. So that's arbitrarily because I just go like that and I just randomly kind of, I don't know the dimensions currently of this image, so I got to go in here. Image size, you can see that pixels. Okay, so it's 531 times 531 pixels. Okay, so that we would call this a 1-to-1 image ratio. You know, unlike that projector, it's not a 1-to-1 image ratio because that horizontal line is much longer than the vertical one. But this is a 1-to-1 image, and that's what we want. When we import things to Maya, we want a 1-to-1 image ratio. So typically, you'll see that when we start with texturing, you basically double up from 2. So, you know, like 256 would be 1, 5, 12, 10, 24, 2048, and so forth. You know, most common image resolutions. Oh, wow. Yeah. So, but it doesn't make any sense just to go in here and set this to pixels and increase these pixels. I mean, I can't do it, like literally type in 1024 times 1024. Now, yeah, this image would be, it does have more pixels, but since the original image really didn't have more pixels, you're not going to increase the quality at all in this image. You're just kind of increasing those existing pixels or making it larger, but you're not adding to the resolution. So if I go Control T to transform and then I hold Shift and I scale it up, I can scale it up, but it doesn't really increase the quality. You know, it's just you have a X amount of pixels and that's it in the original image. So let's say you downloaded a picture that was not 1-to-1 image ratio. Like you just found something on here that you liked and it did not have a 1-to-1 image ratio. Incidentally, a lot of these seem to have 1-to-1. So that's nice. But oftentimes you'll find something not like this one. That's not a 1-to-1 image ratio. But maybe, oh, that's a wonderful chair. And then okay. So then you put it in here. But then you can make a new document. And then just say, okay, so like I said, most common image resolutions, we could just try to stick to them because why not? And then you could do 512, that would be like half K. 1024, typically we say that's 1K. And then 2048 would be 2K. 4096 would be, or 4096 would be 4K. Why would I make a 4K image to paste this tiny image into the 4K? That doesn't make any sense. So there's never any reason to go larger than the pixels you have. You're not going to increase the resolution. So if this original image only has like 375 times 256, there's no reason to make this a very large image at all. So I could do like a 256 times 256 image resolution and hit create. So that's a tiny little thing. But this one had a little more though. How many? Yeah, okay, so I just scaled it up, whatever. So, okay. But then, once you do that, once you make a one-to-one image resolution for whatever you want, you can go into whichever image. Okay, let's download this one so that it makes sense. Oh. Mhm. Photoshop does work with JPEGs. I don't know. Okay, so here we have, this is not a one-to-one image, right? So, but I've just made my own little one-to-one document, and I can make a new layer. Then I go back to this one, and I'm just going to copy all of this into the other one. So I go Control A. Control A will select everything in the current layer, and then Control C. Here you're using Control C, Control V to copy paste. In Maya, you use Control D to duplicate. But here at Control C, I'm just copying all the pixels. I go to this one. I made a new layer, and I'm on this layer, and I just hit Control V, and that will paste it into here. And then I can go here, or press a V to move things, move this around, place it there. That's the easiest way, because now I haven't really scaled anything. I just literally grabbed this, pasted it into here, and I made the image resolution manually, and I know that now everything is right. It's 1-to-1. I made this no bigger than it needed to be. It's 256 times 256. Okay, great. And then this could then be, I could store it as a JPEG or a PNG to use in Maya. Let's try PNG. And I would do, so yeah, so JPEG you're probably familiar with. It's a very good, yeah, format for reducing file sizes. PNG is a newer format. Targets and TIFFs, these are not compressed, so they would be very large files. So a lot of people think that whenever you're using CG, you have to use targets and TIFFs. No, absolutely not. You can use PNGs. It's a very good compression, and especially for this. I mean, we're only making this for a little reference, it doesn't matter at all. But PNG works, JPEG works. So I'm just going to put it in here. Okay, so that's the recording. Where's the, here we go. And I could put it in data. Now I'm in the project folder, and I can put it, for instance, in images or data or wherever you want to put it. Images. I can make this chair, ref, save. Okay. Now it's saving the PNG, and then I go to Maya. There are various ways of setting up like an image in Maya, but I will just show you a very quick thing. If I make a plane, we're not going to talk about UVs now, but a plane has UVs perfectly aligned. It's just a plane. You don't have to touch the UVs because they're already there. Okay, but for any other object, you would have to talk about UVs. We don't have to do that for a plane. So I can go rendering editors, hypershade. We looked at this in the lab session for those of you who were there. But Yeah, so I'm probably gonna have to, we'll get back to this on the lab, but I can now do a surface shader. A surface shader is just a shader that doesn't really have any light information. It just shows the image. So I can middle mouse button click and drag that onto the object. Now the object has this material assigned, and then I can go material attributes and just grab that reference image. Yeah, I realize this is too much. I will do this on the lab, but I could do basically out color. I'll select the file node. I turn off this filter type, and the file is in images because I put it there. And then we don't see it, but we have to press number 6. Now we have textured mode. Yay! And then we can move this around. Oh, that's nice. And now we have a reference. So that's it's a pretty easy way. There are also like image planes and all that you can do, but this is a simple way to set up a reference image. And then we could also like, so if you wanted to model this and always have that image there. And then we do have these display layers. So in the channel box, we can add something to a new display layer and then turn that into a reference. So yeah, I'll do this again on the lab. But now basically this object is within that display layer and I can't touch it because I now made that a reference. So now it's just there, but I can't touch it. And so that's nice. It's just there as a reference, right? So a lot of people, when you start out modeling, you will look for orthographic images. Or let's see, orthographic chair. We'll probably find some. Like, right, these would be then schematics of a certain, like a design blueprint. So here you have the side view, front view, other side, top view. And obviously these would then correspond to the orthographic views in Maya. And then you could set up your reference images so that if you wanted to be really meticulous and go in and make this exact model, yeah, you can do that. But I would encourage you to try to loosen up a little bit and just like make something. Uh, you don't have to be so accurate. Just try it out. Try out all these tools. And then, but if you do want to have a reference image in there, just like a visual quick reference, this would be how to do that. So, yeah. All right. I think that's it. So, any final questions? Great. So I will see the first group. Was it 12:30? Yeah, so 3D people, you will be in the lab at 12:30, and then games people, you will be there at 4, and this will be good. Okay, bye.